Something already shifted. You felt it before you understood it. Somewhere in the last several months there was a change in the air, a change you could not name, and your body registered it as anxiety, as a low and persistent dread, as the feeling that something is coming or something is wrong or something is ending. And you assumed, because everyone around you assumed, that the feeling was about the economy, about prices, about the news, about the visible world out there shaking. But the shaking out there was never the real event. The real event happened inside you, in your nervous system, beneath your awareness, and it has already begun, and almost nobody has noticed what it actually is. There has been a reset, a wealth reset, not in the markets, in you. And the reason it has been feeling like anxiety, like dread, like something is wrong, is that this is what a wealth reset feels like from the inside before you understand it. It is the friction of an old self being asked to die so a new one can take its place. Most people will misread that friction for their entire lives, panic, and abort the reset right at the threshold. Tonight I'm going to teach you to read it correctly, and more than that, to complete it, because once you understand what the dread actually is, you can stop fighting it and start using it, and the same sensation that has been draining you becomes the exact doorway into a completely different financial reality. The reset has already begun. By the end of this, you will know how to finish it. Let me explain what I mean by a reset in the nervous system, because this is not a metaphor and I am not being poetic. Your relationship with money does not live in your bank account. It lives in your body. It lives as a set of automatic responses, a baseline level of bracing, a default assumption about whether there is enough that runs underneath every thought you have ever had about money. When you see a bill, your body responds before your mind does. When you check your balance, there is a flinch or a relaxation that happens faster than thought. That automatic layer, the one that reacts before you can choose, is your true financial self. Not your beliefs about money, not your affirmations, the reflex. And for most people, that reflex was set a very long time ago, in childhood, in a household, in years of repeated experience, and it got locked into a pattern of scarcity, of bracing, of not enough, and it has been quietly running your financial life ever since, generating the exact circumstances that match its setting, because the world always rises to meet the reflex. Now here is what is happening, and why I am telling you a reset has already begun. That old reflex, the scarcity reflex you inherited and never chose, is starting to lose its grip. You may not have noticed it consciously, but something in you has grown tired of it. Something in you has begun to question whether the bracing was ever necessary, whether the dread was ever telling the truth, whether the not enough was ever real or just an old recording playing on a loop. And when a deep pattern begins to loosen, the loosening does not feel like relief at first. It feels like anxiety. It feels like the ground moving. Because the pattern, however painful, was familiar, and the nervous system clings to the familiar, even when the familiar is a prison. So as the old scarcity self starts to crack, the cracking registers in the body as dread, as unease, as the sense that something is wrong. But nothing is wrong. Something is finally going right for the first time in your life, and it only feels wrong because you have never been here before. The reset has begun. The question is whether you will recognize it and complete it, or panic and reassemble the old self out of fear. This is the part almost everyone gets wrong, and getting it wrong costs them the entire opportunity. When the old self begins to dissolve and the anxiety rises, the untrained person does the most natural and most destructive thing possible. They try to make the anxiety stop. They reach for anything that will restore the old familiar feeling, even though the old familiar feeling was scarcity. They go back to compulsive checking, back to obsessive budgeting from fear, back to the grind, back to the bracing, because the bracing at least feels known, and the dissolution feels unknown, and the nervous system would rather have a familiar hell than an unfamiliar freedom. And in reaching back for the familiar, they reassemble the very scarcity self that was finally falling apart. They abort the reset. They climb back into the cage and pull the door shut and call it safety. And then they wonder why nothing in their financial life ever truly changes. Why every breakthrough collapses back into the old pattern. Why they keep returning to the same set point no matter what they earn. It is because every time the reset begins, they panic, and the panic rebuilds the prison. You are going to do the opposite. You are going to learn to feel that dread, that unease, that loosening, and instead of reaching for the familiar, you are going to let the old self fall. Neville Goddard understood this at a depth almost no one teaches. He said that no one can lay hold of a new state while still clinging to the old, and that there is always a sensation of falling, of letting go, of a kind of death when you move from one state to another. The drop in the stomach is not danger. The drop is the doorway. The very sensation you have been running from is the sensation of release, of the old assumption finally letting go of you. And on the other side of that drop, if you do not grab the walls on the way down, is a different self entirely, one whose baseline reflex is not scarcity, but sufficiency, not bracing, but ease. The reset wants to deliver you there. Your only job is to stop interrupting it. Let me make this concrete because abstraction does not change a nervous system. Only specifics do. Picture the moment you next feel that financial dread. The bill arrives, or the number is lower than you hoped, or the thought of the future tightens your chest. In that moment, the old pattern wants you to do one of two things, both of which are forms of clinging. It wants you to spiral into fear, rehearsing the disaster, feeling the lack fully, which deepens the scarcity reflex. Or it wants you to suppress, to force a fake positivity, to grit your teeth and affirm abundance over the top of a body that is screaming lack, which only creates a war inside you that the lack always wins. Neither of those completes the reset. The thing that completes the reset is a third response that almost no one knows how to do. You feel the dread fully, without resisting it and without believing its story. You let the sensation be there in the body, raw, and you simply decline to grab the old meaning that wants to attach to it. You let it be energy moving through, not a verdict about your life. And in that allowing, the sensation does something remarkable. It moves. It rises, it peaks, and it releases, and on the far side of the release you are quieter than you were, and a little freer than you were, because a piece of the old reflex just dissolved and did not get reassembled. That is the entire practice, repeated over the days and weeks of the reset. Every time the dread rises, you meet it this way. You stop running. You stop fighting. You stop believing the story it tells about scarcity and disaster. You let it be a wave of sensation, and you let it pass through you without grabbing the walls, and each time you do, the old self loses a little more of its grip, and the new baseline settles a little deeper. This is not positive thinking. This is the dismantling of a nervous system pattern that has been generating your financial reality your entire life. And it is happening now whether you cooperate or not, which is why I say the reset has already begun. The only choice you have is whether to complete it or abort it, and the people who complete it walk into a relationship with money that the people who abort it will never understand, because it is not about money at all. It is about which self is running the body when money shows up. If you are feeling something move in you as I say this, if there is a recognition happening, a sense that yes, this is the dread, this is what I have been feeling, then I want you to do something before you go any further. Look in the pinned comment. I have placed a short guided practice there that walks you through exactly how to meet the dread and let the old self fall without reassembling it, step by step, so you do not have to do it from memory in the moment it counts. And leave a single word below, just the word reset, so that the version of you on the other side of this, the one whose nervous system has already settled into sufficiency, knows you are choosing to complete it and not abort it. The ones who comment are the ones who do not climb back into the cage. Now let me show you what is actually waiting on the other side, because if you only understand the dread and not the destination, you will not have the courage to let go. On the other side of the reset is a self for whom money is quiet. I want you to really feel the weight of that word, quiet, because right now, money is loud in your nervous system. It is a constant low noise, a background hum of calculation and worry and bracing that never fully turns off, even when you are not consciously thinking about it. It is there when you fall asleep. It is there when you wake. It colors every decision, every relationship, every plan, every small purchase. The scarcity self lives in a world where money is always making noise. The reset, when completed, turns the noise off, not because the money problems all magically vanish in an instant, although the circumstances do begin to change, but because the reflex that generated the noise has been dissolved. The self on the other side simply does not produce the hum. Money becomes quiet the way a healthy body is quiet, the way you do not feel your own heartbeat unless something is wrong. And from that quiet, an entirely different financial life becomes possible, Because for the first time, you are not making decisions to silence an alarm. You are making them from stillness. And decisions made from stillness are almost always better, clearer, bolder, and more aligned with sufficiency than decisions made from a screaming nervous system. This is why I keep insisting the real event is internal and not external. The wealth reset that matters is not a change in the economy that will rescue you or ruin you from the outside. It is the change in which self is generating your reality from the inside. Because the same external economy produces millionaires and produces the broke in the same year, in the same city, under the same conditions, and the difference between them is not luck and is not mostly even circumstance. The difference is the reflex. The difference is the baseline assumption their nervous system carries into every room and every opportunity and every decision. The economy is a mirror, and it shows each person their own reflex. The person whose reflex is scarcity sees an economy of scarcity, finds the evidence everywhere, makes the fearful choices, and confirms the setting. The person whose reflex is sufficiency sees an economy of opportunity, finds that evidence everywhere, makes the bold and easeful choices, and confirms that setting. Same world, opposite realities, authored entirely by which self is at the controls. And the reset is the moment the controls are changing hands, from the inherited scarcity self to the chosen self of sufficiency. The dread you feel is the controls being pried loose. Let them be pried loose. Do not grab them back. Now I want to address the fear underneath the fear, because there is a deeper reason people abort the reset, and until you see it, you will keep aborting it without knowing why. The deepest reason the nervous system clings to scarcity is that scarcity has an identity, and identity feels like survival. You have been the one who struggles for so long that the struggle has become who you are. The vigilance, the careful budgeting, the worry, the sense of yourself as someone who has to fight for every dollar, all of it has fused into an identity, and the nervous system protects identity with the same ferocity it protects the body, because at the deepest level it cannot tell the difference between losing who you are and dying. So when the reset begins to dissolve the scarcity self, a primal alarm goes off, and the alarm says you are disappearing, save yourself, go back. And going back means rebuilding the worry, reactivating the vigilance, restoring the struggle, because the struggle is the proof that you still exist. This is why people sabotage their own breakthroughs. This is why the windfall gets spent, the opportunity gets fumbled, the breakthrough collapses. It is not bad luck. It is the nervous system protecting an identity it mistook for survival, killing the new self to resurrect the familiar one. And you will do the same, unless you understand that you are not the struggle. The struggle was a costume you wore so long you forgot it was a costume. Letting it dissolve is not death. It is the first time you get to find out who you are without it. And here is what makes this moment, this particular season of your life, different from all the times before. The reset has already begun on its own. The old pattern is already loosening, which is why you have been feeling the dread in the first place. You are not trying to force a change from a standstill. You are being offered a change that is already in motion, and all you have to do is not abort it. This is far easier than starting from scratch. The hard part, the loosening of a pattern that has held for decades, is already happening underneath your awareness. The friction you feel is the evidence of it. All your conscious mind has to contribute is to stop interrupting, to stop reaching back, to recognize the dread as release rather than danger, and let it complete its work. You are not pushing a boulder uphill. You are being asked to take your hands off a boulder that has already started to roll and let it roll, and trust where it is taking you, which is out of the cage you were born into and into a self you have never met but have always been underneath. Let me give you the nights, because as with everything in this work, the nights are where the new self gets set. During the day you meet the dread and let it pass, dissolving the old reflex piece by piece. But at night you do the opposite and equally important work, which is to impress the new baseline. In the drowsy state before sleep, when the conscious grip has loosened and the deeper mind is open, you do not rehearse the day's worries the way the scarcity self always has. Instead, you occupy for just a few minutes the felt sense of the self on the other side of the reset. You feel in the body the quiet, the absence of the hum. You feel what it is to lie here as someone for whom money makes no noise, someone whose nervous system is not braced, someone for whom sufficiency is simply the background condition of life, unremarkable and total. You do not picture money. You feel the nervous system of the one who is done bracing, and you fall asleep inside that feeling. Every night you do this, you are setting the new baseline a little deeper, telling the deepest layer of yourself that this quiet, this ease, this sufficiency is the new normal, the new home, the new reflex. The days dissolve the old self. The nights install the new one. Between the two, across the weeks of the reset, the controls fully change hands. I want to be honest with you about the timing, because false promises help no one. The internal reset can complete faster than you expect, sometimes in weeks, because the old pattern is already loosening, and you are simply cooperating with a process in motion. But the external world, the circumstances, the numbers, the visible evidence, those lag behind the internal shift, sometimes by a good while, because the outer world is the slow mirror reflecting the inner change, and mirrors reflect what is, not what was. So there will be a period, and you must be ready for it, where you have done the inner work, where you genuinely feel the quiet beginning to settle, where the dread is dissolving and the new baseline is taking hold, and yet the bank balance has not visibly moved, and the circumstances still look like the old life. This gap is the final test, and it is where the last and most dangerous temptation to abort lives. Because in that gap, the old self whispers that nothing changed, that it did not work, that you imagined the whole thing, and it invites you to climb back into the bracing, to resume the worry, to abandon the quiet, and reactivate the alarm. And if you do, you reset yourself back to scarcity, right at the threshold of the new life. Do not do it. When the gap comes, you remain in the quiet. You stay as the new self not because the evidence has arrived, but because this is simply who you are now, and you let the slow mirror catch up in its own time. It always does. The only people for whom it does not are the ones who abandon the new self in the gap and understand what is really being asked of you here, because it is both smaller and larger than you think. It is smaller than the culture's version of change, which demands you grind, hustle, force, and exhaust yourself into a new financial life through sheer effort. None of that is being asked. The reset does not run on effort. It runs on allowing, on letting the old self fall, on declining to reassemble the scarcity reflex every time it tries to come back. But it is also larger than that, because what is being asked is that you let go of an identity you have held your entire life, that you stand in the unfamiliar space of not bracing, not worrying, not struggling, and tolerate how foreign that feels, how exposed, how strange without rushing back to the familiar misery. That tolerance, that willingness to remain in the unfamiliar freedom long enough for it to become familiar, is the whole work. It is not hard in the way effort is hard. It is hard in the way trust is hard. You are being asked to trust a self you have not met, to let go of a self you have outgrown, and to fall through the dread into the quiet on the other side. That is the reset. It has already begun. The only question that remains is whether you will let it finish. So, when the dread comes tonight, and it may well come tonight, you will know what it is now. It is not a warning. It is not a verdict. It is not the truth about your future. It is the old scarcity self losing its grip, the inherited cage beginning to fall away, the controls being pried out of the hands of a self you never chose to be. Meet it. Do not run, do not suppress, do not believe its story. Feel it fully. Let it move. Decline to grab the old meaning, and let it pass through you and release. And each time it does, you are a little freer, a little quieter, a little closer to the self on the other side, the one for whom money is silent and sufficiency is simply the air. The wealth reset has already begun. It began inside you, in the only place that was ever going to matter. And most people will misread it as anxiety and abort it out of fear and rebuild the cage and never know how close they came. You are not going to be most people. You are going to recognize it and meet it and let the old self fall and walk through the dread into the quiet and never climb back. Let me show you the mechanism of how the reflex builds your reality, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and you will catch it operating in real time. The scarcity reflex does not just sit passively in your body. It acts. It reaches out into the world through 1,000 micro-decisions you make without noticing, and it constructs the very reality it expects. When the scarcity self sees an opportunity, it hesitates, because hesitation is what bracing produces. and in the hesitation the opportunity passes to someone bolder. When the scarcity self is offered more, it shrinks. It negotiates against itself. It accepts less than it could because asking for more feels dangerous to a nervous system braced for not enough. When the scarcity self has money come in, it tightens, it grips, it spends from fear or hoards from fear. And either way it stays in the relationship of fear, and the fear leaks into every transaction and repels the very abundance it craves. The reflex is not a passive setting. It is an active author. It writes your financial life one flinch, one hesitation, one shrinking at a time. And here is the liberating part. The self on the other side of the reset writes a different life with the same mechanism running in reverse. It sees opportunity and moves, because there is no bracing to hesitate. It is offered more and receives it cleanly, because asking for what it is worth feels natural to a nervous system that assumes enough. Money comes in and it stays relaxed, makes clear decisions, lets the money move and grow without the grip of fear, and the ease leaks into every transaction and attracts more of the same. Same mechanism, opposite reflex, opposite life. You are not changing what you do first. You are changing the self that does it, and the doing reorganizes on its own. I want to take you back to where the reflex was set, not to dwell in the past, but because seeing the origin loosens the grip. Almost no one chose their scarcity reflex. It was installed early by watching. You watched the adults around you and money, and you absorbed their nervous systems before you could speak. You felt the tension in the house when bills came. You heard the particular tone in a parent's voice when money was discussed, the fear, the resentment, the resignation, and that tone went into you and became the background frequency of money in your own body. You absorbed beliefs you never examined, that money is hard, that it is scarce, that it corrupts, that it is for other people, that wanting it is shameful, that having it is dangerous, that losing it is always around the corner. None of that was yours. You inherited it the way you inherited a language without choosing it, and you have been speaking the language of scarcity ever since, fluently, automatically, never noticing it was learned, and therefore could be unlearned. The reset is the unlearning. And there is something almost sacred in it, because when you dissolve the inherited scarcity reflex, you are not only freeing yourself, you are ending a pattern that may have been passed down for generations, refusing to hand it forward, becoming the one in the line who finally set it down. That is a larger thing than money. That is the breaking of an inheritance that was never worthy of you. Now let me give you a way to recognize in your own life that the reset is genuinely underway and not imagined, because the signs are subtle and easy to miss if no one names them. The first sign is exactly the dread we have been discussing, the unexplained financial anxiety that does not match any specific disaster, the free-floating unease about money that has been with you lately. That is not a sign of trouble. That is the first sign of the loosening. The second sign is a strange new tiredness with your own worry, a sense that the old anxious story about money has started to bore you even as it still frightens you, a flicker of seeing through it. That boredom with your own fear is the new self beginning to peek through. The third sign is moments of unexpected quiet, brief windows where the money hum goes silent for no external reason, where you notice you have not thought about it in hours, where a strange peace appears that you cannot account for. Those windows are the new baseline testing itself, showing you the destination in advance. And the fourth sign, the one that confirms it, is that the old coping mechanisms stop working as well as they used to. The compulsive checking gives less relief, the anxious budgeting feels more hollow, the grind feels more pointless, because the self that those mechanisms served is dissolving, and they no longer have a master to comfort. People misread this fourth sign as falling apart. It is the opposite. It is the scaffolding coming down because the building underneath no longer needs it. So gather these signs and read them correctly. The dread, the boredom with your own fear, the unexplained windows of quiet, the coping mechanisms losing their grip. Together, they are not the signs of a financial life collapsing. They are the unmistakable signature of a nervous system mid-reset, an old scarcity self in the process of dissolution, a new self of sufficiency rising underneath. And every one of them is asking the same thing of you, which is to stop interpreting the friction as failure and start recognizing it as transformation. The same sensations, read through the old frame, say everything is falling apart, panic, go back. Read through the true frame. They say the old self is finally falling away. Stay, let it. The sensations do not change. Only the meaning you assign them changes, and the meaning is everything, because the meaning determines whether you complete the reset or abort it. This is the whole reason I am talking to you tonight. Not to give you a technique you do not have, but to give you the correct meaning for sensations you are already feeling, so that you stop fighting the best thing that has happened to your financial life in decades. And once you hold the correct meaning, the practice becomes almost simple, though simple is not the same as easy. By day you meet the dread as release, and let the old reflex dissolve, declining every invitation to grab the walls and rebuild the cage. By night, you sink into the felt quiet of the self on the other side, and impress that new baseline into the deep mind before sleep. In the gap, when the inside has shifted but the outside has not yet caught up, you remain the new self anyway, refusing to abandon the quiet just because the slow mirror has not finished reflecting it. And across the weeks, the controls change hands. The inherited scarcity self that was never yours finishes dissolving, and the self of sufficiency that was always underneath becomes the one running the body when money shows up. You do not have to make the reset happen. It is already happening. You only have to stop aborting it and start completing it by reading the friction correctly and letting the old self fall. There is one more thing I need you to hold on to, because it will carry you through the hardest moments. The scarcity self is going to fight hardest right before it dies. This is true of every deep pattern, and it is true of this one. As the reset nears completion, as the old reflex feels itself genuinely losing its grip, it will mount one final convincing campaign to pull you back, and it will not feel like a small temptation, it will feel like an emergency. The dread will spike. A circumstance may arrive that seems to prove scarcity is real after all, an unexpected expense, a frightening number, a setback that lands precisely when you are starting to feel the quiet. Do not be fooled by the timing. The dying self always stages a crisis at the threshold, because crisis is its last tool to make you grab the walls. If you understand this in advance, the final spike loses its power, because you will see it for what it is, the death throes of a pattern, not the return of reality. Meet that final spike the same way you have met every other, by feeling it fully, declining its story, and letting it pass. And when it passes, and it will, the old self will be gone, and the quiet will be all that remains, and you will understand that the loudest the fear ever got was the moment just before it disappeared forever. The reset completes on the far side of the storm it stages to stop you. Walk through that storm, it is the last one, and on the other side of it, you will look back at the dread that has been haunting you and finally understand it was never your enemy. It was the labor pains of a new self being born, and like all labor, it was loudest right before the arrival. You were never falling apart. You were being remade. And the anxiety you have carried, the one you blamed on the economy and the news and the world, was only ever the feeling of becoming someone money could finally rest with. If this landed, the guided practice is waiting in the pinned comment. If this landed, the guided practice is waiting in the pinned comment, and it will walk you through meeting the dread and letting the old self fall without reassembling it in the exact moment it counts. Comment the word reset if you are choosing to complete it instead of abort it, so the version of you on the other side can find you in these comments and know you did not climb back into the cage. And tell me below, what does the dread feel like for you? Where do you feel it in your body? Because the moment you can describe it as sensation instead of believing it as a story, it stops being your master and becomes your doorway. I read everyone. Walk through it.